Good almost afternoon, everyone. We have just a couple of minutes before we'll get started here officially. Jeff Jensen, Director of Community Programs. Excited to be with you all for this great presentation on community roadside plans. Again, we're going to give it a couple of minutes here. You should be able to see and hear me, but I cannot see or hear you. And so the way that you can communicate with me is through the questions tab on your layout there. So if you have any questions, feel free to utilize that. In fact, maybe we could get folks started utilizing that. Maybe share with me where you're calling in from, where you're joining us from. I looked at the list of registrations and even saw a couple that were outside of Iowa, which is great. I'm certainly proud to brag about our program here in Iowa, but this will be more specific to Iowa communities, and then even more so towards the end, specifically to small towns under 10,000 in size, although all Iowa communities should have a roadside plan, certainly. City of Palo, hi Tammy. Still have another minute. We'll let folks continue to roll in here. I'll get my screen ready to go. There we go. For those of you just joining us, welcome. Jeff Jensen, Director of Community Programs. You should be able to see and hear me, but I cannot see or hear you. So the way that you can engage with me is through the questions tab. And so if you have questions here today, please utilize that. And to get us in the spirit of asking questions, if folks want to just use that to chime in where they're from, that would be great. And there we go. I have 12 noon. So welcome everyone. Jeff Jensen, Director of Community Programs with Trees Forever. And I'm so pleased to be able to be with you here today to talk about roadside plans for small towns. And just a reminder, this is going to be recorded, so there will be an opportunity to watch it at a later time. You should be able to see and hear me, but I cannot see or hear you. And so to ask questions, you'll utilize the questions tab. And without further ado, let's get on with it. Oh, let's get to the right screen here. Here we go. So welcome, Jeff Jensen, Director of Community Programs. And the first place to start is to have you join, or pardon me, have you check out the Trees Forever Stewards of the Beautiful Land landing page. That is a great resource for you to learn more about the program and the different field days and webinars that we're going to be having. We also have our Stewards of the Beautiful Land Facebook group. And so this also has a lot of that information. It's a place where you can also engage with us. Bree Hull, field coordinator in Northeast Iowa, keeps this up to date and keeps posting, pardon me. And so utilize that, search for that Steward of the Beautiful Land Facebook. Our agenda for today is real straightforward. I just want to highlight a couple of upcoming webinars and some upcoming field days. So June, holy moly, folks, June is just around the corner. Can you believe that? And that means that we will start to have field days in the counties that we're working in. This year, that's Allamakee. We'll also be in Cerro Gordo and Cass and Marshall counties. And so then we'll turn it over to Jeff Jensen to talk about roadside plans for small communities. So a couple of dates for some upcoming webinars that you should get on your calendars, or check out the Trees Forever calendar to get registered for. June 11th and 25th, and then in July on the 9th and the 23rd. On June 11th, we'll have Anceta with IDALS, that's the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, talking about urban conservation. Then later in June, we'll be talking about pesticides and roadsides, and our very own Bree Hull will be co-presenting on that one. And then a special treat, July 9th, we're going to have Phil Kerback for Iowa's glacial history. This has always been a home run and a lot of interest because Phil's with the Iowa Geological Society and just does a real bang-up job presenting, some would say a boring subject. I find it fascinating, certainly. But talking about the glacial history of Iowa, of course, Iowa is known for the different glaciation events. The Des Moines Lobe, where I live, is certainly affected by that. But he'll give a great overall history of some of the different areas, some of the different counties that we're working in, and provide some of that history. Okay, I mentioned at field days, they're coming up fast and furious, and things are starting off with Intro to Prairie, and that's going to be in Cass County at their Cold Springs County Park. That's going to be Thursday, June 12th with Brad Riphagen. So be sure to check that out if you're down in that neck of the woods. And then we jump forward to Alameda County, and that's way up in northeast Iowa, where there's going to be a fantastic prairie hike and plant ID with the naturalists there at the Goat Prairie at Yellow Forest State Park, starting at 10 a.m. So a wonderful forest and a great opportunity to do some plant ID and learn from some great folks at the County Conservation Board there in Alameda County. Then we have Marshall County, and that's going to be Brad Riphagen again, invasive species removal. So invasives are an issue all over the place. And so at Grammar Grove Wildlife Area, they'll be sharing some tips and tricks, and you'll also be able to get your hands dirty doing some invasive species removal. And then the last but not least, in June, the 25th, Cerro Gordo County. Come on up here to Mason City and join me at Lime Springs Nature Center in Mason City. We're going to be doing a prairie walk and then a wonderful, wonderful new area that the County Conservation Board just recently acquired, basically across from the Mason City High School, the Pruce Wildlife Area. And so it's kind of a blank slate there. And so there's going to be an opportunity to see what's there existing. And then later on in the season in September, we're going to go back there and do a planting. And so that'll be an opportunity to come full circle and see what things look like here in June before wrapping up later in September. Again, want to point out that landing page on the Trees Forever website, treesforever.org/stewards. This is where all those field days, and you can go to then the events page on the Trees Forever website and get registered for all of those great opportunities. We're keeping you busy this summer, something to do. Just a reminder, cannot see or hear you, but you should be able to see and hear me. And so utilize that questions tab and ask questions as they come up, and I'll get to them in time or at the end, certainly. So, okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Jensen, Director of Community Programs with Trees Forever. So give me just a second here, folks. We will get there eventually. Okay, hopefully that's coming through real well. We're going to be talking about roadside plans for small towns. And so just a reminder for those that may have joined late, I was looking through the registration and I saw a couple of registrations from outside the state of Iowa, which is fantastic. I encourage you to learn about a really cool program that we have here in Iowa, but this is going to be most applicable to Iowa communities. So just keep that in mind. And then further, once we get into the nitty gritty of the actual plan itself, just a point of reference that the process that I'll be laying out is specific to communities under 10,000 in size. There's a slightly different process for larger communities, but the benefits and the reasons for having a roadside plan and all of that are going to be the same. Certainly the frequently asked questions. And so just a caveat before we get started here. So here's a just real quick overview, an agenda overview, I guess you could say. We're gonna first talk about what is a roadside plan. Then we'll talk about why it's important, some of the grant funding that's associated with that roadside plan, some of the frequently asked questions that come with developing a roadside plan, and then finally just the steps to complete a roadside plan. So what is a roadside plan? And I guess the first thing to say is it's this really long name, Integrated Roadside Vegetative Management, IRVM. We just call it a roadside plan. And it actually has its roots going way back to the mid 70s. And then finally in the 1980s, through Iowa Code, we developed one of the first states in the whole nation to have the idea of integrated roadside vegetative management, and then adopting legislation statewide that focused on cities, counties, and the state. And all of this was really focused on the goal of providing alternatives to conventional roadside management practices, the cost that was associated with them, the certainly need to manage those invasives that may be in the roadsides or those woodies that get in there, all in an effort to save money and get better results, certainly, as well as protecting natural resources. One of the things that blew my mind is that in the state of Iowa, I believe the figure is there's over 750,000 acres in roadsides. And so that is a lot of potential habitat. That's a lot of potential erosion that could be taking place. And so it's a natural resource that is sometimes overlooked, and thus the reason for necessitating the LRTF, the Living Roadway Trust Fund. And I just provided that link down there at the bottom to the website. A real quick heads up, the website through the state of Iowa just went through some upgrades. And so where I used to have a presentation that actually went to the website itself and had some of the screenshots from it, I don't have that updated quite yet with the new website. So that's why you're seeing a little bit different presentation than maybe some of you have seen in the past. So in a nutshell, and that's where we'd have the bump because I am a hazelnut grower, yes, in the state of Iowa. So in a nutshell, a roadside plan is a document that outlines how you manage your roadsides, or as we would consider it in our cities, in our right of way. So what is a roadside plan? It really is a packet of information that has all of these different components to it. And so the first component is the signed template, which is a document that's provided on the DOT website, on the LRTF website. And you basically fill in your information for your community. And then that's a document that's signed by the mayor and the city administrator. And I'll show you an example of that. I'll show you an example of a final plan in just a moment. Any city tree ordinances that you may have on the books, we ask you to just put those in a PDF and send them our way so that they can be included in the roadside plan. If you don't have any for whatever reason, that's fine. And we can also help you then to not only develop them, or in some cases just review them as part of this process. Still see where there are some communities that have things like calorie pear that are allowed, even Norway maple, which we basically would like to see removed as well. So it's an opportunity to just get those ordinances looked at as well. Then we have the roadside plan narrative, and that's something that actually Trees Forever, one of our field coordinators, would develop, and it's more or less an interview with the public works director or the street superintendent, whoever that person may be, to just ask them where they do activities, basically mowing, within the community that would be considered the roadside or the right of way. And then from that narrative, we develop any applicable maps to just show where those mowing or where that activity might take place. And then finally, there is a resolution from the city council that needs to be signed by the city administrator and then the mayor as well. And that is a template, again, that's provided on the website. I will be able to provide it to everyone that registered here as well in a follow-up email so that you can have all the information, as well as an example of what a roadside plan looks like. And magically, that's what we're going to do next here. We're going to actually go through a completed plan so you can see what it entails. So give me just a moment here. And where is that? Here we go. So I hope I'm sharing my screen with the Burt, Iowa roadside plan. This is a roadside plan that was adopted by Burt here earlier this spring. And this is just the cover page. The next would be a simple table of contents that just outlines the management plan itself, that narrative I referred to, the ordinances, the resolution, and any of those maps. And here is that template document. You fill in your community's name and the date. It references the Iowa code for IRVM or the Living Roadway Trust Fund, I should say, provides some definitions, provides just an introduction on what the goals of the roadside plan are all about. It talks about procedures and then different types of management methods, none of which are restricted. So certainly there's cultural methods that communities use, there's pesticide methods that community use, there's mechanical methods, and this just helps to define those methods, but certainly does not put any restrictions or hamper communities in any way to change what they're already doing. Talks a little bit about education and information. And then again, it's going to be signed by that city clerk or administrator and then the mayor. Then we get into that narrative document, the roadside plan narrative. And so this is the interview with, in this case, Jordan Yonke, the Burt Public Works Director, which just lays out that the roadsides in Burt are primarily the right of way, encompassing the space between the road and the sidewalk, wherever sidewalks are present. Generally speaking, homeowners mow and maintain the right of way, which is almost exclusively turf grass, except for tree maintenance, which the city handles where appropriate. And then we just lay out some of those areas specifically in Burt that are managed by the city. And so we can see athletics park and activity park and around the fire department. We just list some of the equipment that they may have to engage in roadside activities. And then we get into the ordinances here. And so this would be the ordinances that Burt has on the books here, probably similar to many other communities. And then finally, then we get to the resolution. Again, this is a template document that is going to be available on the website. I'll make it available to you all in the email as a follow-up, but this is what the resolution would entail that would go to City Council. That would then be signed by the mayor and city clerk or administrator. And then we have the maps that just identify where some of the roadside activities, in this case, mowing takes place. This is the right of way from Iowa State Street to Bush Street. You have all the way around Activity Park there. And so just these maps that highlight where those activities take place. That is a complete roadside plan packet, essentially, that would get submitted to Tara Von Wass at the DOT. In this case, it's a 16-page document. Sometimes there's few as 12. I've seen them larger as well, just depending on the different maps that you have in the different areas, how big your list of ordinances are, things like that. But that's a roadside plan right there. So the next question that comes up to many communities that I've worked with, and hopefully I'm sharing my screen again, is the why of it all. So why is a roadside plan important? Why does my community need a roadside plan? And let's just start off with the simple answer of your community doesn't need a roadside plan. Your community's been doing fine for however long they've been in the state of Iowa without a roadside plan. So it's not necessarily a need type of a thing. It's really an opportunity. So why is a roadside plan important? And so I think it's important to just roll through a couple of highlights. And so one, it's all about planting more natives by lowering your inputs and having a greater impact for your community. It's really that simple. I consider a lot of the planting practices that can go into urban communities as green infrastructure, and they can really have an impact. And there are programs through the Living Roadway Trust Fund to help this become a reality in your community. The age-old saying, those that fail to plan to fail. I mean, it's just a good idea to have a plan. And in this case, there's a formal structure, so it's not like you have to come up and with a new type of process, or we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a structure in place. We just have to complete the components and we're off and running. This one I think is very valuable in that it documents simply what you're already doing. And this is the point I want to drive home to cities, is that it's a little bit different with counties, because there might be some different uses for roadsides. They're going to maybe be impacted by woody encroachment and other invasives, where the roadsides in all of our cities are basically the same. It's the turf grass between the roadside and the sidewalks, if sidewalks are even there. And generally it's handled by the residences, by the landowners. They're going to mow that little bit. And yes, maybe there's some trees there, maybe there aren't. It just depends. But even so, you know, that's it. There's nothing unique. There's nothing controversial. It's just that's how it is. And so that's why every roadside plan that I've ever done, I basically cut and paste that narrative document and just update the locations and the equipment. But what a road, or what encompasses a roadside, is always the same for all of our communities. So finally, you know, the real carrot here is that it makes your community eligible for funding every single year on an annual basis to the Living Roadway Trust Fund. And we are actually coming up to that due date, which is June 1st. So June 1st is always the due date for the Living Roadway Trust Fund grant applications. And so within that context, let's segue to grant funding that is available to communities, but you must have a completed roadside plan on file with the DOT. So I just want to stress that having this roadside plan is a prerequisite for being able to apply for some of the grants that are available through the Living Roadway Trust Fund. One thing to keep in mind is that all cities are competing against all cities. Cities aren't competing against counties for funding, which is nice. Because that means that you're only having to compete with a smaller pool of cities. And we don't have a lot of cities that have roadside plans quite yet. We certainly have some that have utilized the program very well, but we don't have a lot of communities with roadside plans. And then it just kind of depends on if there is a project that they're in need of. So consider getting that roadside plan knocked out so that you can be eligible. Probably too late this year, since June 1st is just around the corner, but June 1st, 2026 is going to be here sooner than you realize. And so get with a Trees Forever field coordinator. We can help you get one of these things knocked out. Let's talk about grants. And so this document, the grant funding guidelines, this is going to be accessible on the DOT website. Again, I can make this document, the link for it, include that in the email, the follow-up email to folks that registered here. But this really is going to be a valuable document that's going to outline all the aspects of grant funding through the Living Roadway Trust Fund, including the categories, how to apply. Here we go. An introduction, the funding sources, you know, who those eligible applicants are, an outline of the process itself, all of the match requirements, all of the application instructions. It is an online application, meaning that you should prepare all of the questions and documents, all the questions and answers in a Word document, and then be ready to cut and paste them into the online application. Definitely the criteria for evaluating those proposals then. And then eligible project types. Certainly there's 13 different grant categories. And in fact, let's just talk about that. So what are some of the different grant types that are available to cities and counties? And just real quick, some of these may be more applicable to counties than cities. So keep that in mind. But again, 13 different categories. And so demonstration projects, certainly education type of programming, In fact, Stewards of the Beautiful Land is funded through the Living Roadway Trust Fund. We also have then some of that specialized equipment, and that could be things like stump grinders and wood chippers that could be utilized for your roadside program in your city to help manage, like with the emerald ash borer. There's going to be a lot of trees removed. There already are lots of trees that are removed in communities, but with other counties and cities that it hasn't really been affected yet, up in my neck of the woods, for instance, that might be something that will allow then the city to get a better handle on all of those removals and managing all of that volume of brush and things like that. Certainly gateway and community entryways. I think of the small community of Varina, less than 100 population. They were able to get a Living Roadway Trust Fund grant for a community entryway planting of natives. So that was a wonderful opportunity. Special staff training. So this could be to send your city staff, maybe public works director or some of your city maintenance folks like that to, for instance, the Shade Tree Short Course at Iowa State. We call it Tree School. That happens in February, or to the Roadside Conference that takes place in October. And so you'd be able to get registration, I think some other costs covered with that. So that's an interesting one as well. All of these are going to require some sort of match, whether that's going to be cash or in kind. All of those details are going to be found in this document, certainly. There's also this video that's going to be on the Living Roadway Trust Fund website that absolutely should be watched. It's just under 15 minutes. That is a great instructional video on how to submit a grant application. It lays out the different screens that you'll see when you go to apply and how to put information in there. So just a wealth of information, and certainly something that should absolutely be done. If you're even just thinking about it, what does it entail? This is going to give you that information. And then once you have things pulled together, watch it again because it's basically a step-by-step tutorial. So I want to shift here just to a couple of frequently asked questions, and that's Tara Von Was, the Living Roadway Trust Fund Coordinator with the DOT. That's who you'll be submitting your roadside plan to. And a couple of questions that we get right off the bat from folks is, are lawnmowers an eligible piece of equipment for cost share? All communities need lawnmowers. They're one of the most used pieces of equipment, but the answer to that is no. That is not going to be an eligible piece of equipment. It really has to be a specialized piece of equipment, like a flail mower or a rotary mower or a mulch head or something like that. So just general lawnmowers, no, they're not going to be an eligible piece of equipment. So a lot of folks would like to know what program to use if they want to plant trees in the right-of-way. And so the real answer to this is you could use two programs, gateway and community entryway, certainly. It could also be a demonstration project, but the key here is you want to clearly communicate the location. It needs to be in the right-of-way, certainly. You need to provide that detailed map that shows where the plantings are going to take place. And then listing those specific species are going to be important as well. And speaking of those species, generally speaking, the species requirements for these projects are going to be Iowa native species. However, up to 25% of the woodies could be non-native. And so think of maybe having a ginkgo in a right-of-way planting potentially, that would be allowed. We ask that, or the LRTF, the Living Roadway Trust Fund, asks that you provide that plant material source. Certainly purchasing plants that are going to be cold hardy here to zone 5. Furthermore, following those Iowa SUDIS specifications, 90-30, and then keeping in mind that the project must be in the right-of-way or adjacent to the right-of-way on a project like that. Are cities eligible for native seed from the Tallgrass Prairie Center? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Cities are eligible for native seed from the Tallgrass Prairie Center. Christine Nemec, who is the roadside program manager at the Tallgrass Prairie Center, is going to be the main contact there. And I believe fall is when those orders go out. They just have the seed distribution previously here in early May, which is a fascinating 3-day adventure where all of this seed comes in, bulk seed, and it gets packaged up and put into orders for counties and cities all across the state. And then those counties from as far away as Keokuk and Lyon County and others travel to the Tallgrass Prairie Center to pick up their seed orders. We have a great video on our Trees Forever YouTube page, so check that out. It's a lot of fun. Great opportunity to volunteer as well. Could any of the grant programs be used to establish natives in like rain gardens or pollinator gardens in the right of way? And the entryway is yes, again, with a gateway and community entryway or a demonstration project. With demonstration projects, there's typically some sort of educational signage component, which is why it's not typical. It's a possibility for tree plantings in the right of way, but usually it's the gateway or community entryway areas because that signage component can be cumbersome. But in this case, yes, you could absolutely utilize these these two grant programs specifically if you wanted to establish those natives in the rain gardens. You can see there the match is going to be roughly 20%. A real common question is how long does a community have to complete an awarded grant? And just go through that real quickly. Applications are due June 1st. Then that review committee is going to get together beginning in July to go through all of those applications from the cities, from the counties, and then statewide. And so they'll do their work and then basically come up with those projects that are going to be awarded and then notifications by August 15th so that, again, cities, counties, and other statewide organizations would know. Then grant agreements are sent out in late August to be reviewed and signed, agreements sent back. Then there's going to be an official letter that would be sent out that you can begin at such and such a date, and then complete project by December of the following year. So that's kind of the overall grant timeline from application to then completing the project and having the reporting and everything by December of the following year. So let's wrap up by just talking about the steps to completing a roadside plan. The first step is just to contact and learn about the opportunity. That's what you're doing here today with this webinar. That's what you might be doing at a one-on-one if you were to meet with a field coordinator with Trees Forever. A phone call to Trees Forever from communities can spark this opportunity. We're also out recruiting communities because this really is some low-hanging fruit within your community that makes you eligible for this grant funding. Not that you're necessarily in a position to utilize it. You might not need to utilize this grant funding for years to come, but by having this roadside plan, which isn't too terribly cumbersome for communities under 10,000 in size, you've checked off that box and now you have that in place. So contact and learn, that's going to be the first step. Then it's to collaborate. And what we mean by that is Trees Forever, the field coordinator will interview either through Zoom or if we can make it in person, that public works director, the street superintendent, city clerk, administrator if they're there, the mayor if they want to get involved. But basically, we just want to learn where are those areas in town that you do some sort of management on. Again, typically it's going to be mowing and weed eating, things like that. So that's going to be only on public property. So maybe on those public building areas or around city parks, that'll be the area. And that's what we want, the information that we want, so that we can then go on to the next stage, which is to document things. And again, Trees Forever, we'll put together that narrative, we'll put those maps together, and then documentation from the city side is going to be getting that template signed by the mayor and the city administrator, and then getting that resolution put forward to city council and then signed off on. That's the documentation that they're responsible for. And then everything gets signed and sent again to Terravon Wass at the Iowa Department of Transportation. And then you have a roadside plan. That's it. And when it comes time to apply for grant funding, you've got that box checked off. So just to wrap this up here, this complete plan is going to include all of these components: the signed template management plan by the mayor and the city administrator, any of those city tree ordinances, that roadside plan narrative, should say, and then any applicable maps, and the signed resolution from City Council. Here's my contact information. There is the contact information for Tara Von Wass at the Living Roadway Trust Fund. She is the coordinator there. Here is what the resolution looks like that would go out to the City Council and be adopted. It's a template. You would just put in your information. Those are the goals, and then it gets signed and approved. So with that, let's see if we have, yes, we have at least one question here. Can LRTF grants be used to hire and pay part-time staff? Our cash-strapped small town only has one employee to do equipment maintenance, repairs, mowing, trimming, basically everything, totally swamped. That is a really good question, Wade, and I'm not entirely sure that I know the answer to it. My initial answer is going to be no, that there wouldn't be funds specifically because there's no grant program that would specifically fit that category. But that being said, at the county level, when a county adopts a roadside plan, it does bring resources to that county. So that's something that maybe we'd have to look into, but specifically to hire and pay, no, that wouldn't be an eligible cost that the program would be able to fund, although it could help fund other things that could help that person. No, sorry. And unfortunately, that's not totally uncommon in really some small town parts of Iowa. I live up here in my neck of the woods. It's the one person that does it all, and or the small group of individuals in a community that's always putting on the local festival or kind of doing those things. So I totally understand where you're coming from. Any other questions that folks may have? Oh, here's a great question. Is this similar to Adopt a Highway? And the answer is there could be some similarities. I think Adopt a Highway is a different program than this here in Iowa. This is specifically the Living Roadway Trust Fund is in Iowa code. And so this opportunity exists. There is a funding mechanism for it to fund this. And Iowa's one of the really unique and trailblazers, so to speak, because one of the first to actually adopt it and have it. And we've been just called out countrywide for having such great roadsides because it's not the same old thing. They're pretty clean. There's the opportunity to utilize some of these native prairie species in our roadsides. So yeah. Oh, here's another question. Is there a benefit when writing the plan to partner with nonprofit organizations to enact and maintain the plan? Honestly, no. And about maintaining the plan and stuff like that, you know, that's where I say this is low-hanging fruit for cities because the roadsides are all managed by and large in the same way. It's turf grass. And again, maybe trees. Most cities don't allow shrubs, you know, so that's not really a thing. And even the trees that are there, again, there's usually some sort of restrictions on, you know, nuts and stuff and fruit, so that's not really a thing. So there's not a whole lot of additional work or anything like that that would be involved with city staff or anything like that. They just keep doing what they're doing, and we just document that. Yeah. Let's see. Are any of this webinar printable somewhere? A link perhaps? Yes, I can follow up certainly with this. This should be on our YouTube page here shortly, so that can be a reference for others, and I can include that in a follow-up email to everyone that would have registered. So question here, I think this is a fantastic opportunity, but not really sure where we could utilize this. Is it possible to have someone come look at our little town, let us know where they could utilize the plan? Possibly, yes. please reach out to one of our field coordinators, myself, if you'd like. I work with a lot of towns. For instance, just a real quick example of opportunities. Recently assisted a DNR technician with a community that had applied for a DNR grant and they weren't selected. They're in my neck of the woods, my territory, so to speak, in my home county here. And so just went there to say hi. And as you're learning about this DNR grant program that you weren't selected for, just wanted to let you know that this is another opportunity here with roadside plans. And the city administrator said, well, how could we use this? And I said, well, it really depends. You know, some communities I've worked with were able to get cost share funding for a stump grinder or a wood chipper to use in their roadside plans within their right of ways. And her eyes lit up and she said, holy moly, we're looking at getting a stump grinder because we have emerald ash borer starting to poke its head out and we need to get ahead of it. And we have all of these stumps. And so I said, hey, let's look at, you know, June 1st. This was just earlier in May. I said, June 1st is coming up here, so we need to get a roadside plan done. We're able to knock it out basically in a week's time with me doing a quick interview with that public works director and then just putting together the plan itself, getting that submitted. And then again, over another week, we were able to pull together a grant application for them to do that was already submitted, but for this June 1st grant application deadline, again, for a stump grinder attachment that could go on one of their skid loaders to be able to use in their roadside program. So some of that equipment could be of use. It could be planting material for trees or some things like that. And then of course, maybe there is no use right now. And that may be the case, but certainly reach out. We'd love to visit with you and see if we could schedule a time. Yes, Iowa League of Cities to provide a presentation or information there. Would love to do that. You guys are my guinea pigs. This is my my draft presentation. So now that I've got it kind of dialed in, I will have a more polished one, and then yes, be looking to get this out to really Council of Governments, Iowa League of Cities, anybody that works with communities to let them know of this valuable opportunity, because again, it's some low-hanging fruit there. Question here about specific grants for areas that border waterways, creeks, stormwater and wildlife areas. Ooh, Tammy, follow up with me, maybe email me directly. I'm not entirely sure, but I'd like to think about that because there may be some stuff that's out there. It really just depends. Green infrastructure wise, yeah. Do larger cities have management plans built into the city taxpayer funded, or have management plans built into the city taxpayer funding? That is a great question that I am not entirely sure about, and something I'm going to keep an eye on. Well, I haven't worked with a whole lot of larger communities. You know, most are going to be a couple of hundred up to maybe a couple of thousand, but great question. Some folks were curious about the emails. Let me bring up that contact information here. That's my telephone number. That's going to be Tara's contact information, emails, and everything. So folks can follow up with either of us. Tara's great in terms of grant questions specifically. Certainly reach out to myself or any of the field coordinator staff to learn more about the roadside plans themselves. Really straightforward. What I will do for those that registered for this presentation, again, I'll follow up with an email that has that template, that has the city resolution. I'll even include Bert's as a template so you can see what a completed roadside plan entails, and really have that as a guiding document, I guess you could say. Well, any other questions? If not, I hope to see some of you out and about at some of the different counties that we're going to be active in. Marshall, over by Marshalltown, Cass and Atlantic, Mason City and Cerro Gordo, and then last but not least up there in Alameda County, that the Goat Prairie. I mean, that one to me, now I'm not saying that there's going to be any goats at this prairie. I want to be, if the name is Goat Prairie, and so with a name like Goat Prairie, you got to think that it might be interesting. And so check out the Stewards of the Beautiful Land landing page for all of those great opportunities. I hope to see you here at some upcoming webinars that we're going to have in June and July here. And I think with that, we'll sign off. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll talk soon.